Consideration, reflection, mercy, forbearance, everything by which a goaded man can curb his rage and passion, fled from him as he turned back. And yet he said, slowly and quite calmly, far more calmly than he had ever spoken to him before: 'Why have you called to me?' 'To remark,' said Sir John Chester, with his wonted composure, 'what an odd chance it is that we should meet here.' 'It is a strange chance.' 'Strange? The most remarkable and singular thing in the world. I never ride in the evening. I have not done so for years. The whim seized me, quite unaccountably, in the middle of last night. How very picturesque this is!' He pointed, as he spoke, to the dismantled house, and raised his glass to his eye. 'You praise your own work very freely?' Sir John let fall his glass, inclined his face towards him with an air of the most courteous inquiry, and slightly shook his head as though he were remarking to himself, 'I fear this animal is going mad.' 'I say, you praise your own work very freely,' repeated Mr Haredale. 'Work?' echoed Sir John, looking smilingly round. 'Mine? I beg your pardon. I really beg your pardon.' 'Why, you see,' said Mr Haredale, 'those walls. You see those tottering gables. You see on every side where fire and smoke have raged. You see the destruction that has been wanton here. Do you not?' 'My good friend,' returned the knight, gently checking his impatience with his hand, 'of course I do. I see everything you speak of, when you stand aside and do not interpose yourself between the view and me. I am very sorry for you. If I had not had the pleasure to meet you here, I think I should have written to tell you so. But you don't bear it as well as I had expected. Excuse me, no, you don't indeed.' He pulled out his snuff box, and addressing him with the superior air of a man who, by reason of his higher nature, has a right to read a moral lesson to another, continued: 'For you are a philosopher, you know, one of that stern and rigid school who are far above the weaknesses of mankind in general. You are removed a long way from the frailties of the crowd. You contemplate them from a height, and rail at them with the most impressive bitterness. I have heard you.' 'And shall again,' said Mr Haredale. 'Thank you,' returned the other. 'Shall we walk as we talk? The damp falls rather heavily. Well, as you please. But I grieve to say that I can spare you only a very few moments.' 'I would,' said Mr Haredale, 'you had spared me none. I would with all my soul you had been in Paradise, if such a monstrous lie could be enacted, rather than here to night.' 'Nay,' returned the other, 'really you do yourself injustice. You are a rough companion, but I would not go so far to avoid you.' 'Listen to me,' said Mr Haredale. 'Listen to me.' 'While you rail?' inquired Sir John. 'While I deliver your infamy. You urged and stimulated to do your work, a fit agent, but one who in his nature and the very essence of his being is a traitor, and who has been false to you, despite the sympathy you two should have together, as he has been to all others. With hints and looks and crafty words which told again on nothing, you set on Gashford to this work before us now. With these same hints and looks and crafty words which told again on nothing, you urged him on to gratify the deadly hate he owes me. I have earned it, I thank Heaven, by the abduction and dishonour of my niece. You did. I see denial in your looks. he cried abruptly, pointing in his face and stepping back, and denial is a lie. He had his hand upon his sword, but the knight, with a contemptuous smile, replied to him as coldly as before. 'You will take notice, sir, if you can discriminate sufficiently, that I have taken the trouble to deny nothing. Your discernment is hardly fine enough for the perusal of faces, not of a kind as coarse as your speech, nor has it ever been, that I remember. Or, in one face that I could name, you would have read indifference, not to say disgust, somewhat sooner than you did. I speak of a long time ago, but you understand me. Disguise it as you will, you mean denial. Denial, explicit or reserved, expressed or left to be inferred, is still a lie. You say you don't deny. Do you admit?' 'You yourself,' returned Sir John, suffering the current of his speech to flow as smoothly as if it had been stemmed by no one word of interruption, 'publicly proclaimed the character of the gentleman in question. I think it was in Westminster Hall, in terms which relieve me from the necessity of making any further allusion to him. You may have been warranted, you may not have been. I can't say. Assuming the gentleman to be what you described, and to have made to you or any other person any statements that may have happened to suggest themselves to him, for the sake of his own security, or for the sake of money, or for his own amusement, or for any other consideration, I have nothing to say of him, except that his extremely degrading situation appears to me to be shared with his employers. You are so very plain yourself, that you will excuse a little freedom in me, I am sure. Attend to me again, Sir John, but once,' cried Mr Haredale. 'In your every look and word and gesture, you tell me this was not your act. I tell you that it was, and that you tampered with the man I speak of, and with your wretched son, whom God forgive, to do this deed. You talk of degradation and character. You told me once that you had purchased the absence of the poor idiot and his mother, when, as I have discovered since, and then suspected, you had gone to tempt them, and had found them flown. To you I trace the insinuation that I alone reaped any harvest from my brother's death, and all the foul attacks and whispered calumnies that followed in its train. In every action of my life, from that first hope which you converted into grief and desolation, you have stood, like an adverse fate, between me and peace. In all, you have ever been the same cold-blooded, hollow, false, unworthy villain. For the second time, and for the last, I cast these charges in your teeth, and spurn you from me as I would a faithless dog.' With that he raised his arm, and struck him on the breast, so that he staggered. Sir John, the instant he recovered, drew his sword, threw away the scabbard and his hat, and running on his adversary, made a desperate lunge at his heart, which, but that his guard was quick and true, would have stretched him dead upon the grass. In the act of striking him, the torrent of his opponent's rage had reached a stop. He parried his rapid thrusts, without returning them, and called to him with a frantic kind of terror in his face, to keep back. 'Not to-night! Not to-night!' he cried. 'In God's name, not to-night!' Seeing that he lowered his weapon, and that he would not thrust in turn, Sir John lowered his. 'Not to-night!' his adversary cried. 'Be warned in time.' 'You told me it must have been in a sort of inspiration,' said Sir John, quite deliberately, though now he dropped his mask, and showed his hatred in his face, 'that this was the last time. Be assured it is. Did you believe our last meeting was forgotten? Did you believe that your every word and look was not to be accounted for, and was not well remembered? Do you believe that I have waited your time, or you mine? What kind of man is he who entered with